Oh, yeah. So I'd like to begin by saying greetings to all from South Africa. It's a great pleasure to be part of this conference and to, on behalf of our center, to thank the organizers of the conference and especially Unrival, with whom we are trying to engage in a partnership. It was great listening to Lyle and Susan on the whole question of truth story and my message in the 21st century. So I like to come from a point of view of a story from South Africa here about the Feast of the Clowns. And somehow when one looks at that, it looks a little bit, one could say you could laugh because a clown brings in so many other thoughts in our ideas. But it's one way of trying to create non-rivalrous possibilities within our city. So it is indeed a great pleasure to be part of this conference. I would say when we look at clowning, and perhaps the book that is seen here is written by the director of our center. His name is Stefan de Beer, and it says Clown of the City. So Stephen Lund talks about clowning as a satire or social criticism. And Stefan says that when we talk about clowning, we can identify something about the weirdness and the frailty of the clown in us. In fact, that the clown reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. But then when also we look at the clown and what he or she does, for the community, somehow it is a festival of inversion, of trying to bring those who are on the margins to the center. And in this particular book that I showed you today, Stefan is talking about, and I quote, the purpose of the metaphorical clown, as he puts it, as we see there, is to embrace the city in love when others have abandoned it, to build the city with care when others trample on it, to cry over which wounded the city and its people when others shy away from it, and to share laughter in places of deep woundedness where others mock and slander it. So the Feast of the Cows, this is a little bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about. It is celebrating art, entertainment, faith, and justice. And when we talk about the feast in the city, we are reminded of the work of Gareth Hardin's The Tragedy of the Commons. If nobody takes care of the commons, if nobody thinks about the values that could be placed on the commons, eventually we destroy the commons. And when we destroy the commons, somehow we destroy ourselves. So I'm going to look at this from this different perspective of loving the city with God's care and love, the festival, the Feast of the Clowns as a playful protest, and the positive my message, talking about mutuality, what we can learn, especially from vulnerable populations, and also building non-rivalrous communities in Tshwane. Tshwane is the city that perhaps you may have heard about, Pretoria, but now it's called Tshwane. And this city is the capital city of South Africa. It's the administrative heart. The embassies are there in Tshwane. You have beautiful art museums, science museums, you have tertiary institutions, you have the Freedom Park, as well as the recent innovation of Gautrain. But at the same time, this particular city of Tshwane has witnessed since the post-1994 period, disinvestment of people moving out from the inner city to the suburbs. And then people also thinking in terms of spatial planning, historical Black and colored townships where Black people and the coloreds were meant to live. And within the city of Tshwane, we have about 250 informal settlements, people commuting daily to come to the city, in order to work, in order to find something to eat. There is a question of increased homelessness. And then it has become a migration hotspot because people who come from outside of the country, because it is the capital city of the country, the Department of Home Affairs that deals with the papers is there. So a lot of people come there, those who are looking for asylum and those who are trying to regularize their their refugee status. This Feast of the Clown, the story that I'm about to tell us a little bit, is a collaboration between Etswana Leadership Foundation, which was founded by faith-based organizations who saw the flight from the inner city. And we are beginning to ask the question that Henri Lefebvre asked in 1971, who actually has a right to the city? They came together and they began to work towards building a healthy and vibrant urban communities, which is very integrative and inclusive of people. And they have different programs, that deals with homelessness, that deals with the women and the child, the girl child, who are sometimes living in challenging circumstances. They also deal with people who have substance abuse and all that, trying to create communities, healthy communities within the city. And then the Center for Faith and Community, where we serve, which is also trying to bring in research and documentation so that the faith can become a resource for healing and justice. And then bringing in other disciplines within the University of Pretoria to create a kind of multidisciplinary collaboration so that the research that is done is linked with praxis. It links with what is happening exactly in these communities. So then if we can look at that first aspect, and we are looking at this from the point of view of, what Susan and Lyle has spoken a little bit earlier about, mimesis and positive mimesis, actually. Oftentimes when we look at the city, Lyle was talking about the media and the post-truth society. The question we ask is, do we love our city when we speak only of bad things? And are we enslaved to the negative media narratives about the city in which we live? So how can we see the city? How can we see Swane, which is Pretoria, with God's eyes? And the question is, how can we transform these city communities, especially the vulnerable populations in the cities, into oases of hope, where the vulnerable are empowered, and then we prevent urban decay? And then we also argue that the city is a good place to live in. It's not total, it's not a bad place, because the city has assets. There are people, there are resources, there are businesses, there are formal and informal businesses that are there. And also the city provides the opportunity for networking and partnerships. In other words, we do not see the city so much as an object, but we try to humanize the city. In other words, that the city in which we live can be humanized in order to produce that which will be beneficial to the people. Then the Feast of the Clowns also helps us to celebrate the city, to play, to adore, and to wonder. And Habakkuk's in his book, Feast of the Fools of 1969, he talks about dancing as a form of prayer. And so when we say dancing with a clown, we begin to think for vulnerable communities, music and song and stories and dancing is actually a form of prayer. And we look at that prayer in terms of lamentation, of looking at the city and also the flight that is happening in the city, the disinvestment that is happening in the city, lamenting it, but also trying to celebrate that for which the city is known for, the life that is within the city. It also provides an opportunity to reclaim agency, to say that we cannot outsource our city to certain interests. We belong to the city, so we reclaim our agency in order for us to produce that which is important for the city in which we live in. And then Stefan talks about the March of the Clowns. From the little photo you see there, there is this sign that this lady says, I would rather be excluded because of who I include than included because of who I exclude. In other words, during the march, we allow everybody to express themselves, and people can come in to this festival, which also talks about festival fantasy, but also a form of critique. So the Feast of the Clowns is also an expression of the love for the city. And like I said, we laugh and we cry over the sad stories of the city, but also we believe that there are potentials within the city that could be unveiled through this Feast of the Clowns. Then, as I mentioned also, it is a form of playful protest. It's a social critique. One of the things that we notice is that the cities and the communities are commodified. They become, objects that are sold to the highest bidder. And what this feast does is tries to upset the hierarchies of power that are there and also speaks truth to the power. So in the march, in the Feast of the Clouds, everybody is invited. The city administrators, the government, institutions, the academy, civil society organization, faith-based organization, vulnerable people. In fact, the homeless people, during the feast, they form a guard of honor. They are given, or rather they take this agency of their agency to say that they can contribute, to make it orderly. So they form a guard of honor for the clowns as they go to celebrate, the city. Everybody is included. And then it also provides an opportunity for us to name the death-dealing themes of Swane, the negative narratives. Lai was talking about that in his presentation. And also, Susan mentioned that, with regard to children, there are certain negative narratives that, with the Feast of the Clouds, we try to look at and to say that, no, we can upturn these negative narratives in order to showcase the city. And so the clown is accepted in the community and does not ask for permission in order to be a social critique. The clown interrupts, it disrupts, it surprises, disarms. But also the clown liberates. And so we have musicians, we have painters, we have the academy, everybody's coming to be part of this Feast of the Clowns. Then it also offers us an opportunity to explore the theological tension between, life and death, cross and resurrection. And, being anchored at the Faculty of Theology and Religion, it is very, very important for the center to express this to the people that, life is also not about the cross, the lamentation of the city, but there is a resurrection, there is a hope. We can also begin to reinvent the future, to begin to reclaim, the city for ourselves and also, in theological terms, for God. So the feast helps us to reimagine indeed and reconstruct relationships within the city and to also talk about the different imaginative possibilities. It's so interesting to come and see because it's not only about the March of the Clowns, but homeless people are given spots where those of them who are artists can display their work. Those who are musicians, they can sing, they can show indeed that they have talents, which if the city and the city administrators are open to, they will welcome. They will see that indeed the city has a lot of possibilities. And to integrate the vulnerable people into the spaces that are within the city. Of course, ultimately is to find a common ground that nobody is excluded. And in that process, we also encourage research and documentation. As we invite people from the academy, different disciplines to come and participate in that, and then they see the themes which can help their research and also to talk or to write about the city. And as Stefan said, I quote, "The city is a stage on which millions of people participate to perform life together or separately." And this is in this book that I shared with you that Stefan wrote last year called The Clown of the City. And then we get into what Susan had spoken about with regard to René Girard and mimesis, that it mustn't always be negative in terms of this rivalry that could also lead to scapegoating. This is one of the things that the Feast of the Clowns tries to do. In other words, we reclaim agency. We don't just scapegoat the city authorities or say you are responsible for this, but we also say that all of us are responsible for what is happening in the city. And during the Feast of the Clowns, the children are allowed to also participate, or rather they themselves, as Susan would say, they also reclaim their agency to be part of the march. And there is a Swahili proverb that says, "The laughter of a child lights up the house." When the children are leading this march, it's so exciting because it is done out of freedom. There are no inhibitions in what they are doing. Most importantly, also, we see that during the Feast of the Clowns, there are certain epistemologies from below. There are learnings that are coming from vulnerable populations. it's not only about the ivory tower, but it's also about population that oftentimes have a lot to share and a lot that could help to build a city, that to build also the different aspects of what is being done in the city, but are neglected because somehow they have been labeled, or as Lyle pointed out to us, one could say that, oh, is this a form of new truth? Is this really true? Or are these people just being brought in so that they can share what they have? So it's very important for us that there is a kind of a learning, a process that comes from below. It mustn't be, top down, but it's also, bottom up, that people who have been gifted by God can also express themselves. And during the clan, we have interactive workshops. Like I mentioned, people are given opportunities to talk about what they are doing in their stalls, in their small kiosks. Those who are painters can do that, those who are artists and all that, so that people can know and celebrate the life of the city. And so the networking is all that we've written about. But the Feast of the Clans is motivated by what you may have heard, which is called Ubuntu. It's an African philosophical concept that actually talks about relationality. I am because we are. And we draw from this spirituality in which no one is excluded, and trying to create memories and trying to create fantasy and hope for the future. So getting to the conclusion now, we're talking about creating non-rivalrous communities in the city. And this is important. It's one aspect of what the Feast of the Clans tries to bring, that we are not in competition with one another. Rather, we are harnessing, we are collaborating. And it is important because in collaborating, then we are able to absorb the pain and the anger which is there. And there are certain gaps that need to be filled. Oftentimes, people scapegoat and say, well, the city didn't do this or that. An example is just to clean up in front of your store, in front of your house. Perhaps the city comes once a week to remove the garbage, but you can fill the gap by bringing the dirt together, by contributing something, because you own the city. And so in that way, we unveil capacities and try to link the assets that the city has with the needs in terms of people, in terms of businesses, and in terms of perhaps civil society issues that are happening within the city. So the feast also creates awareness about social justice issues, as mentioned there: homelessness, human trafficking, women and girls at risk, HIV/AIDS, refugees and migrants. And then the biggest thing that we also try to do is to invert rivalry, to make it so that we can build trust, among ourselves, and not, like I said, be competing with one another, but build trust through friendships, lamenting those things which deal dead to the city, and trying to reinvent the future, bringing the future to now, so that we are able, and also to think about the transgenerational capital that we have, as Susan mentioned, that we have a responsibility for the generations yet to come. And so that we need to make our city, to make our homes good for them, because also we inherited these from those who've gone before us. So we also have, you could call it a moral obligation to ensure that we create a social transgenerational capital. So in conclusion, dear friends, I just like to share a little bit with what happens, at the end of the Feast of the Clans. Usually, because of COVID, it's usually done in October, but now we try to do it virtually, and people look forward to it. About 250 people, sometimes over, join this. And in conclusion, I would like just to say that, quoting Stefan de Beer, in vulnerable urban communities marked by transition and frailty, where the powerful poses as custodians of a new future while exploiting the poor. Jesus as jester is constantly disrupting the status quo, and Jesus extends an invitation to join on a foolish clown-like mission. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. That was great. Oh yes, can you stop sharing your
Yeah.
Screen, how, yeah, finding the right button, right?
Yeah. There we are.
There we go. Well, I just love that story. I'm so glad you were able to tell about the Festival of the Clowns to our audience here, because, you know, we talk about story and we talk about changing the narrative we tell about who we are and the future. And this is, to me, I've always looked at that as a living story, like you're embodying a new way of being together in the city. And so I just find it so beautiful.
I'm moved too by the examples of needing to have models who are also in process. I think this is something I see in media a lot, right? That often the stories we hear are implicatively about here are people that you should imitate or here are people you should denigrate, right? And the kind of storytelling we're talking about is what is that middle space of imitating people who are also in process and therefore lessening the potential for shame or tension when it comes to when mimesis activates. Suzanne, you actually have a lot of questions for your paper in the chat bar. Maybe you could start answering a couple of those and kind of putting a capstone on all this that we can discuss from here.
Okay, let's see. David. Suzanne, how do you think digital devices, Google Classroom, and other technologies interact and transform the classroom in childhood from Montessori perspective, NMT, during and after the pandemic? Solutions were always tech-based. I know. I mean, it's a particular problem for early childhood. I think as kids get older, of course, they have much more cognitive ability and can engage with technology in a way that young children can't, because they're still developing their cognitive abilities. I know my grandkids are in preschool and they all went digital. And I think, you know, it was okay. I think it worked because they'd already had relationships with their teachers and with their friends that had been formed, you know, by being together. So the technology worked up to a certain degree, but you just can't rely on it in early childhood. It's just, in fact, you shouldn't rely on it in any way to teach in early childhood. They're just not ready yet. They're just not ready. They need physicality. They need engagement. That's how they learn. Let's see. Oh, and Felicity, that story about the chief and the father, I know it is just, it's so revealing, and about what's behind all of our conflicts. It's just a need to be loved and respected. So true. Let's see, what else? Did I skip? That was Felicity. Miriam. Hi, Miriam. I moderated Miriam's session the other day. The observation of children not being able to absorb an object if they're interrupted remind me of digital applications that turn on or off when you react at a certain time, the automatic chat robots that pop up on a website if you don't click something immediately. I mean, that's annoying to grownups too, okay? But in childhood, what's happening is their capacity for concentration is, it's there, it's present. And if you interrupt it, you disrupt it, you ruin their ability to concentrate, and it creates this frustration, this cycle of frustration in which because they don't have the language to say, you know, I wasn't done with that, I needed to lift that block up a few more times before I would be set. If you stop them in the middle, all they can do is cry or have a tantrum or something. and instead of allowing them to complete that cycle of interaction with the object, you disrupt it and you disrupt their development. So it creates a lack of confidence in kids, then a frustration, and then it does destroy their ability to concentrate. So then they lose their attention spans. But Montessori recognized too that if you take children who have had bad patterns instilled in them and you put them in the right environment, in a Montessori environment, she observed what she called normalization would happen. And so children will be able to recover their ability to concentrate and to engage with materials. And it's through that engagement that they become calm, they become sensitive to order, they want to follow adult models because they're not being scandalized by their models all the time. And so this process of normalization was something she pointed to as sort of evidence for the naturalness of this peacefulness in childhood, in early childhood. So thanks for that question. Yes.
Suzanne, do you think that a lot of the common problems that we're discussing as part of this panel are the result of the people participating in these problems right now seem to be the result of children who had their attention spans interrupted, who have grown up and now have these very short attention spans, these kind of ping pong attitudes, right? I feel like on the local scale that Jude is talking about, on the larger scale I've been talking about, we're talking about a crisis of attention that you're saying happens at a very early stage, and now we're kind of reaping the consequences of that. Does that sound right? And if so, what is the way forward from there?
Yeah. How do you normalize adults? That's the question. And I think Montessori would have certainly agreed with that. She really said that her program was one of early childhood education, but that what she was aiming for was the perfection of the human race. A modest goal.
Yeah,
very modest. But I would love Jude to comment on the impact that the Festival of the Clown has on people, because it is inviting people into a play space, into a place of childhood again and imagination. And I wonder, Jude, if you might comment on a little bit about the impact that has on the participants.
Well, thank you so much. Indeed, like we mentioned, it's playful, and it's good to see the children who are actually they make it more exciting, one would say, because they dress in all these colorful costumes and all that. But initially, people looked at it when it began in 2015 with a bit of suspicion. What are these clowns up to? That kind of thing. But gradually, they began to see that a conversation is being created. And the conversation is, although it is focused on the city, is about interpersonal relationship. It's about linking our capacities and our assets and being able to even laugh at ourselves in order to understand that we also make mistakes. But in that process, because of the particular history of South Africa in terms of the racial divide, do you understand that there are capacities both ways, and that we can come together. So gradually it is growing, and then the academy came in, researchers were interested to see what is happening, business people came in, artists came in gradually, and we began to unveil potentials that people never really thought about. So it's a gradual impact. One wouldn't say that we've arrived there already, but gradually every year something new is happening, and some people have come from other cities to actually see and to see if they can replicate this particular Feast of the Clowns in their places.
Oh.
That you look at the model and to see how it works.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love that artists are included, because I really think artists model that capacity for engagement with an object as an object. Like I'll always think of the way Michelangelo is described as approaching the marble. He says, I'm not imposing, I'm just revealing what's already in the stone. And I think that capacity for staying, for actually being able to see the thing that's in front of you for what it is. Children can do it, artists can do it. I'm intrigued by dance and music as these embodied expressions where you kind of lose yourself, the self that gets in the way of engagement with each other, you know?